Hello. I recently read the book Life of Pi. The book is very controversial because of the two main ways you can interpret the story. In both interpretations, the story takes place in India, with a boy named Pasin Patel, or Pi as we call him. Pi and his family own and operate a local zoo, but because of local political and social turmoil, they load a ship with all the animals with the destination of Canada. On the voyage, the ship ran into some rough water and mysteriously sank. But from this point on, the stories differ. In one version of the story, Pi escapes the sinking ship on a lifeboat. Accompanying him on the lifeboat are few animals from their zoo. These animals consist of a zebra with a broken leg, an orangutan, a hyena, and a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker. In this story, the hyena attacks and eats the zebra, and then attacks and attempts to eat the orangutan until Richard Parker steps in and attacks and eats the hyena. From this point on, Richard Parker and Pi live together on the lifeboat for the remainder of their voyage, 227 days. In the other version of the story, Pi escapes the sinking ship on a lifeboat accompanied by people. The people consist of a Taiwanese sailor with a broken leg, his mother, and a chef. In this story, the chef chops off the Taiwanese sailor's broken leg to take him out of his misery, but then turns cannibal and eats the sailor's leg. Later, he kills Pi's mother. After that, Pi kills the sailor and remains alone at sea for 227 days. In this story, the cook is representative of the hyena. The Taiwanese sailor is representative of the zebra. His mother is representative of the orangutan, and Pi represents Richard Parker. Now, we don't know which story is true, but I tend to believe that Pi was accompanied by people on the lifeboat. This book has a main theme of faith, and because each story has, well, a lack of evidence, you have to put your faith behind the interpretation of the story you choose to believe. I tend to believe that if any young boy or teenager, as in Pi's case, was put through that horrendous scenario, you would absolutely lose your mind. So, subconsciously, you would make up a story that allowed you to live with yourself after murder. In this case, after killing the chef and being lost at sea for countless numbers of days, Pi lost his mind and subconsciously created the animal story so he could blame his sins on Richard Parker, which was really the inner animal inside of him. This allowed him to be able to live with himself at sea. Pi is very religious and believes in 3 different religions simultaneously. That being said, in his eyes, it would be very sinful to kill anything, let alone a human. Because he did kill the cook, under normal circumstances, he would not be able to live with himself morally. But because desperate times call for desperate measures and change who we are to our core, he didn't make the decision. And as he said, something in me died then that has never come back to life. This confirms my point that he was unable to live with himself the way he was after killing the cook. He was changed as a person that day for the rest of his life. Personally, I do not believe there was even a possibility that animals made it on the lifeboat with Pi, for many reasons other than he completely made the story up to cope with his terrible situation. I don't even think there was a possibility that the animals made it on the lifeboat, for many reasons. The first being that the animals were seasick and were sedated for their travels. Secondly, all the animals were in cages, and the only one with keys was Pi's father. So it would be very, very hard and unethical to release a bunch of animals around the ship amidst a dangerous shipwreck? I don't think so. On top of that, even if the animals were released, I find it very difficult to believe that the animals were able to navigate their way out of the ship. And even if they did that, it'd be very unlikely for them to even be able to get inside of the lifeboat. I also find it nearly impossible to believe that Pi was alone with a dangerous tiger on a small lifeboat. Animals like tigers will not coexist and live alongside animals in conditions like that. Conditions like extreme hunger, extreme heat, extreme dehydration. Realistically, the tiger would be starving within a day or two and would find any food it could, especially a tasty human within it close to its vicinity. because, quote unquote, animals in the wild lead lives of compulsion. We also have the fact that no wild tiger was seen, spotted, or discovered in or around the Mexican area, which is strange considering animals like a wild tiger are not indigenous to the area. Although personally I believe that Pi began his journey accompanied by people, quote unquote, you can't prove either way. So there are some holes in my interpretation of this story. For starters, there were a few small bones found in Pi's lifeboat, which were assumed to be of meerkat, but without evidence of meerkat origin, they could resemble really any small animal. That being said, if the bones actually did end up being meerkat bones, it would corroborate Pi's story about the carnivorous island that he told in the story that included the animals. The next piece of evidence that might cause me to question my theory is that if Pi's mother made it onto the lifeboat, what happened to Pi's brother and father? What caused them not to make it onto the lifeboat if they were all together? Now that might make people question the authenticity of my interpretation of the story. But to back that up, there were only 4 survivors that made it onto the lifeboat, and of those 4, only 1 did end up surviving. So there are infinite number of possibilities of why Pi's brother and father did not make it onto the lifeboat. It is also somewhat difficult to comprehend that a very kind-hearted, vegetarian, and very religious young boy could take any life, let alone a human life. But the circumstances were very dire, and I believe that Pi was strong enough to do what he had to do. In conclusion, I believe that Pasin Patel, or Pi as we know him, survived for 227 days alone on a life raft, but he began his journey with human companions. I believe that he changed as a person during the brutal voyage that he encountered, and that he created in his mind a delusional image of Richard Parker to help him cope with his brutal situation. As he says, without Richard Parker, I wouldn't be alive today to tell you my story. This is the interpretation of the story that I believe based on how and what I read in the book Life of Pi, but as I've previously stated, there's no correct story that we can prove. But I put my faith behind the story that Pi began his journey accompanied by human companions, and this trip changed him and deluded his mind and caused him to create the image that was Richard Parker. Thank you.